We're going to get started here. Welcome, everyone, to our February Small Farms updates. I'm really excited to have you all join the call today and to get to know our speaker. Today, we have a topic on utilizing soil health and conservation to engage students and the community. And our speaker is Jackie Kehr. She's the interim manager at DePauw's Ullem Student Farm. And this top photo here is just one taken from the internet. Gorgeous in the summer, just beautiful. And the bottom one is from just this week. We got to go out to Ullem and have a co-working session and just see the space in action. And they have just a beautiful sustainability center, about 3 acres in crop production, high tunnel, etc. So I'll let Jackie talk more about everything that they're doing there at the farm. And then we'll round things out with just a few highlights from our team.
My name is Jackie Kehr. I am the interim farm manager here at Ullem Campus Farm. So we are at DePauw University, which is in Greencastle, Indiana. We're about halfway between Indy and Terre Haute, just a little bit north of 70, for those of you who don't know where we are. DePauw is a small liberal arts college with somewhere in the range of 1,300 students. We Our campus farm is part of sort of a larger structure that includes, as you saw in the first picture, the Ullem Center for Sustainability and the campus. So the picture that you see right now is actually a picture out the window that is right behind me. We have a wonderful green building where students can gather, community can gather. We have a kitchen. And then we have a lot of really interesting infrastructure here in this space, and then it can be utilized for lots of things. It's also where we have bathrooms and a kitchen if we want to use that for the farm or need to use that for the farm. Um, yeah, so let's go ahead and move on to the next slide since I can't advance, sorry. A little bit about myself. Um, I recently moved, I would say, back to DePauw. I was here many, many years ago as a student, and in the photo at the bottom left there, that's my husband, who is actually, we're back here in this area because he is a professor now at DePauw. I got my undergrad degree in biology and and a minor in chemistry here many years ago. At the time, I focused a lot on ecology and plant biology, and then I went and got my grad work. I did my grad work at Arizona State University, actually in plant community ecology. So I'm an ecologist. I specifically studied the riparian plants, which are plants that live along rivers, in an agricultural setting out in Arizona. There's some really cool irrigation canals and plant communities along those in the like the really old agricultural systems that are out there. There are some that date back to the mid 1800s, which is very cool, and even older ones, but that's what I studied there. I've done a lot of things since then. In the bottom right-hand corner was one of the most influential pictures, I guess, of my farming history. That bottom right-hand picture, maybe some of you know it or have seen it. In southeastern Indiana, the Sisters of St. Francis in Oldenburg used to own a farm, Michaela Farm, that was there. Actually, the farm that supported the convent. But now they actually very recently sold the last bits of the farm to Green Acres, which is a nonprofit that's right across the border in Cincinnati. And so they use the farm now as a part of their education resource for agriculture education, and they do kids groups and that sort of thing. But I was actually the head gardener for our big market garden there. We ran a CSA and things at one point in my life. I've done a lot of things, including education, which makes this place so exciting for me. I've done a lot of work teaching biology and other things in community college settings and other places. And I've done a lot of community education through the Master Gardener programs in both Iowa, which is where I became a Master Gardener, and now that I am a Master Gardener in Purdue, or with through Purdue. So I do some education here in Greencastle, which has been really fun. So that's a little bit about me. And the bottom left-hand, that bottom left-hand corner was here at the farm. So a little bit about Ullem Farm, so you get a picture of what's going on here. This is an aerial view of our space that we utilize. I haven't fully measured. So first of all, I started working at the farm last summer, kind of late in the summer last year, and I haven't fully measured our garden area. All the paperwork says it's 3 acres, but if you start measuring the beds, that's obviously the big triangle or the big rectangle on the left. But if you measure the beds, we're at about 2 acres worth of usable space for gardening. We are predominantly a vegetable garden. We have a few things that are fruits and some perennial stuff, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. We have water access all over that space, which is amazing. We have many hydrants around. We have historically done most things by hand. So we have a lot of hand tools. We have hand tools to work with groups. And we do have a small BCS, which I think probably many of you are familiar with. And that is how we do a lot of our work. We have, at various times throughout the history of the farm, there have been as few as just a couple of employees to as many as 10 summer interns and 2 full-time employees running the market garden. So it sort of varied. And last summer, it was myself and 1 student worker for a majority of the summer. We also have, which maybe you can kind of tell, right to the right of the main market garden space is a greenhouse, and then there's a small packing facility. The greenhouse is wonderful. I have some more pictures of that, which we're just gonna get some work started in there now for the spring. That greenhouse is used for plant start, so we don't do anything in the ground there. The pack house is wonderful. We've got refrigeration and a wash station. Ideally, and in various iterations of the farm, most of our produce production goes to the campus dining hall. It's run by Bon Appetit, and we have a great relationship with them where they will buy the things from the campus farm. So we do have the pack house for proper washing and storage and getting them, the food appropriately. So that's a wonderful asset that we also have. Out to the right edge of this picture, you'll see sort of like a little square in the grass. And there is a little pollinator area there and also some perennial plants that are all maintained around 2 beehives that the Putnam County Beekeepers Association maintains here on the space. They do educational programming. They're actually going to have their beekeeping university, I think is what they call it, coming up in just a couple of weeks. And they host their meetings here, and they train people how to be beekeepers. And they're the largest beekeeping association in the state of Indiana, at least I think like at last count. We have a lot of very active beekeepers here in the area, and they love using this space and having that ability to host events and educate here, which is great for us as well. And then, of course, as I started out, we do have the farmhouse facility here, which is, we use it for all sorts of events, not just farm related, but also farm related. You can go ahead. Thank you. And this is kind of our general greenhouse setup, so So this is where we do a lot of our plant starts, and it is wonderfully heated and maintained by the facilities on campus. And so we'll have that going here pretty soon. We have some plants started, but not in the greenhouse yet. You can go ahead and move forward. Great. So as I said, I started here late summer. It was the end of June last year. We had sort of some turnover, and then we're in the process of strategic planning. So this gave me a great opportunity to sort of, and also at the time we were relocated under the School of Business and Leadership. So the new business dean was excuse me, very interested in maintaining academic connections, exploring future entrepreneurial connections with the farm, and as we're sort of shifting some things at the university. But at the forefront was, as I was coming into this position, let's make sure we maintain as much academic engagement as possible. And so that was one of our big focuses for the fall. And I think we were able to do that in some really meaningful ways. So I'll talk about that a little bit, which is probably different than a lot of your places. We have that big academic piece that's part of our farm. Also, we don't have students who are majoring in agriculture at DePauw. These are, students who come from varied disciplines across campus, and are kind of coming at the farm from a very different place. So that was one big focus that I had. And the other big focus that I had, of course, was to have things growing in the farm in different capacities for different reasons. Because there was sort of a break in when we were using some of the land, there were major important goals, such as get a handle on weed pressure, which we'll see a lot of pictures, which I'm sure everybody has a problem with. Um, we needed to limit labor on different tasks, primarily because we had very reduced labor last year. I wanted to focus a lot on cover crops so we could deal with some problems and creative solutions in big areas. And then, of course, we did want to grow some things for various reasons, including selling to continue that relationship with the dining hall, but also to engage students. And so we'll talk a little bit about some of our favorite crops that we focused on last year. And then finally, our community giving garden, which is really been the highlight and one of the big drivers for a lot of our volunteers here at the farm. So we'll talk about that at the end. Okay. So first of all, just a little bit about academics. We have classes that come out to the farm as part of their curriculum. And so the faculty might assign readings that then are related to food or human relationships with land in some way, and then actually do a service project or get their hands dirty or really just come out and wander around the farm. The kale on the right was actually planted by a class that is Campus Sustainability 101, which is for first years. And they were learning about sort of all of the different pieces of the campus in different ways. So they actually planted those, which was really fun. On the left, the picture includes this was a ad hoc thing. The students knew that there were things going on at the farm. These students were capturing nature sounds for an environmental film course, and they came out to the farm, just a few different groups of them during their on-campus recording sessions, and they were actually capturing the sounds that one of our big cover crops made with this big boom, which I thought was really funny. And then it was awesome. And then also some more students were actually capturing the sounds of bees when they were on some of the flowers. So lots of different ways to integrate that. If you want to switch, I have another picture. You want to move forward? Thank you. We planted a small Three Sisters garden. It was late, it didn't actually produce, but several faculty members expressed interest both in like English and education in some of Robin Wall Kimmerer's works. And so some of them read the Three Sisters chapter from her Braiding Sweetgrass book, and then actually got to come out and witness some of that cooperation of the three different plants. And so we specifically grew some interesting, potentially native, and in some cases, definitely native varieties, that were from different cultures here. Mostly kind of like up and a little bit north of Indiana, but still, we tried to grow certain varieties that were interesting, and then the students were able to come out and sort of look at that. If you haven't read that and you at all are interested in corn or beans and a little bit of botany, it's a beautiful piece that really is very poetic and also filled with really interesting language around botany. If you want to go forward. And then another class that was a huge highlight, we had an anthropology class that was focusing on historic and current systems of dealing with human waste, not just food waste, but other kinds of waste. And they actually came out. They collected some of their own personal food waste and then brought it. We had this student project a few years ago to build some compost bins, and these students came out and actually cleaned up these compost bins that previous students had built and then added their food waste to it and learned what the process of composting is in a hands-on way. So that was really great. Okay, so now on to what we were growing and a little bit about the agriculture. This photo right here shows about 1/3 of our like tillable space. This was the area of the garden where we were able to focus most of our energy this year. So in the foreground is a large, it's about 120 by 100, sunflower field. One of the big things that we focus on here is student engagement and community engagement. And it was suggested that we should try growing sunflowers just to make people happy and to come out and want to come to the farm. It was a huge success. You'll see more pictures later. Um, in the back half of this section, we have like a main drive down the middle. We have two big sections of vegetable production. This is a little late in the season, so there aren't a lot of things there still. But we grew the back right portion where there's a person standing is actually our giving garden. So I'll talk quite a bit about that. Yeah, that section over there. Okay. With our sort of goal of getting things growing in the ground, we had to first deal with weed pressure. Due to certain areas going fallow for various amounts of time. This is an old caterpillar tunnel. It was completely full of Canadian thistle. So I had various student groups helping try to wrangle the weeds. Some of the major weeds that we are dealing with are perennial grasses. This group actually pulled out some perennial grasses that were growing on the mats that were supposed to be lining the caterpillar tunnel. So there was landscape fabric lining the tunnels. This and another one. And there were perennial grasses and a lot of knotweed that had taken up residence on top of the landscape fabric. So that was a big problem this year that we were or this past year that we were dealing with. We also were using silage tarps in areas after I had mowed down the Canadian thistle. So this tunnel specifically was filled with Canadian thistle. And so we are trying to use some silage tarps to deal with some of those perennial or some of those weed bed and um, interesting interesting weed issues. If you want to go to the next slide, uh, I'm sure there are going to be some options for you guys to provide feedback on how to deal with some of these weeds. I hope so. This is another section of the garden that we thought we were going to be able to get a handle on. The students in the background there are walking on some landscape fabric that we were able to put down early in this or midsummer. And we did have some early crops in there. But due to lots of issues, including groundhogs, we gave up on these crops. And within just a couple of weeks, this was this giant pile in the foreground came from basically 3 rows of 1 foot wide between the landscape fabric. We had such a problem with knotweed and various perennial grasses that just came in, established, and this was one of those we just walked away from the section of the garden, and our lacrosse team who is here actually helped clean it up in the fall so we could try to tarp it and start over next year. Uh, Okay, you can move forward. Um, this is how we tackled weeds, primarily in the areas where we were trying to really focus on gardening. So we tried to mulch as much as we could. Most of the pictures right here are actually the Giving Garden, which is a space of our campus farm that is maintained mostly by community volunteers. And the food that is produced here is donated to the local food pantries. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. That being said, this space was pretty highly maintained in the summer of 2024. but they did express to me, I just got involved at the beginning of 2025, that weeds were a problem. We happened to have a lot of landscape fabric in a shed. And so I said, if I'm going to help with this, I want to get ahead of the weeds. And we're going to put down landscape fabric if that's okay with you. And they all said yes. So we put down landscape fabric for the main walkways. Then this is a method that I used from actually when I worked at the Sisters of St. Francis. We used newspaper. You can see the drip line. We put down irrigation, but then we put just two layers of newspaper on top of the soil, and then we held the newspaper down with some old hay mulch that somebody gave us. And to hold the newspaper down, and that shaded out the ground space between the two layers or between the two pathways of landscape fabric. And it really prevented any weeds from coming up. I mean, there were a few right around the base of the tomato plants, but it really, really prevented the weeds. And that allowed us to really focus on tying up the tomatoes, harvesting, and doing those other things. So that was a big focus for us was right at the beginning of the year. Let's see if we can get the ground covered around these tomato plants, and then we can focus more on, growing the plants and harvesting and tying them up. We did the Florida weave on these, which some of you might be familiar with, and it worked to varying degree. We had some mislabeling with the students, which is always happens and it's fine. But we had a lot more Roma tomatoes and they did not do well with the Florida weave situation. So mostly we had a lot of those laying on the ground. We also have in the bottom left corner a huge amount and ability to get chopped leaves from campus, which is phenomenal. I actually have way more this year that I got through the fall and winter. It's been amazing. They chop them as they vacuum them up around the buildings and things on campus. And so we used some of those this past year around the apples, which is the bottom left corner, but we'll be using those a lot more because they were actually able to put them in a very accessible place for this coming growing season. Okay, if you want to move to the next slide, thank you. One of the other big benefits of the landscape fabric, this is again the Giving Garden section, but we did this in other places. We rely heavily on volunteer labor. And so the weather is exceptionally difficult to work around when you have volunteer times when people can come. And so we planted our peppers and our tomatoes in the Giving Garden at a time when most of you would not want to touch the soil. But it was too mucky. We actually got rain. I think that's the last time it happened all year. But it did allow our students and our volunteers to get into the garden at a time when it was probably too mucky, but we got things planted and they were able to make less of a mess because of the landscape fabric. So I saw that as a really big win that I wasn't quite thinking about when I started. Okay, you can go forward. One of the big feedback pieces I got from student volunteers and student workers from the past years were was the time and energy that it took them to drag hoses around and water, even though we do have fantastic opportunities. Like we have so many spigots. Most of you would be incredibly jealous by the number of hydrants that we have out in our garden. I know I am personally jealous. But the we had actually from a previous person who ran the farm in the back of a field or in the back of one of the buildings, we had a lot of supplies to do drip irrigation. And so I went ahead and set that up in a few places where we were going to be growing things. This is my assumption. I believe it was Aquatrax, but again, this was like old stuff that was reused. I think it was supposed to be about 12 psi. I used a lower regulator because it was what we had. I just bought a new one for next year because I don't think that the pressure was correct, but it was used old things, so I made some assumptions that were probably wrong. We put in short sections, like I think Mostly we did a maximum of about 5 or 6 bed long. We had like a 1/2 inch header, which you can kind of see in the picture on the left. And then we did that drip tape, which really helped decrease the time we were spending watering, which I'm sure a lot of you use in your gardens already. But that is a big win for me. I absolutely love having irrigation in the ground. It saves so much time. We can turn it on while we're working. And then I personally love to get my hands in the soil to determine how much, like what the soil moisture is. I know some people use soil moisture meters, and some people always time exactly how long they put the water on. Our soil is kind of variable around, so I like to just get my hands in there and see maybe this week I watered for an hour and maybe next week I watered for an hour and 15 minutes. But either way, I can turn on the water, go about all of the other tasks and come back and check on that. So that's wonderful. I think somebody is like putting something in the chat of suppliers that have some of these things. I highly recommend the drip tape if you're not using it already for your vegetables. Okay, go ahead and move on. The next major thing we did, so we had crops in a few spaces, but we have a lot of land. And so we tried to cover the land with a variety of different cover crops. So we had some early spring cover crops put in before I was here. We had someone else working with the farm trying to sort of get it wrangled for the year, which was wonderful. We had a good maybe third covered in an early spring pea and oat cover crop. I did some different cover crops in the middle of the summer and then some different ones in the fall for various reasons. So if you want to go ahead and move forward, I'll talk a little bit about these different things that we did. So we had a consultant trying to help with the scope of the farm and the future plans. His name is Nathan Boone. Some of you might know him. He's runs a consulting firm here in Indiana. But he suggested we get something in the ground early. And so he actually came out and worked with some of the students and I was here sort of in a volunteer basis to get some peas and oats in the ground. I think he planted it the last week in March, but I didn't do it and I didn't write it down. So that's what we get. So by May, though, in some of the areas where he was, we did have fairly clear soil and such. This was broadcast. And at a fairly high rate, and I don't know what rate he seeded it at, but it took really well. We actually had the perfect rain. It was just broadcast on the surface, and we had pretty good growth by the middle and beginning of May. If you look at the picture in the middle, though, that says May 1st, and you look out in that field, the prettiest, darkest green is the major problem that we one. I would say the major problem we have here on the farm, and that is all Canadian thistle. And this spring cover crop did not do well in that area because the Canadian thistle was amazing. And so someone just asked, how did we prepare the soil? Sorry. Um, all the only thing that was done for this planting, to my knowledge, is that he mowed down some of the soil. Some of the areas had been tarped the previous year, so there was a silage tarp on them, but it was super hit or miss. Um, all he did was lightly till in some places where he could get the tractor. He borrowed a tractor from somebody, and then just broadcast it, and that was it. Some areas it was just maybe he mowed down some weeds, so there was no prep. We did more things for some of the other, but we have really limited equipment. So that was it. And this area actually took really well. And part of what you see did have a silage tarp the previous fall. And so that helped. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. To deal specifically with that high Canadian thistle pressure, we tried Sudan grass in 2 big locations this summer. I planted it July 15th, and I also did the same thing. I mowed down the peas and oats because in some of the location there were peas and oats from the spring here. I mowed them down before they went to seed, and I actually got them. Just with us, we have like a mower on our BCS. It kind of chops and drops it. I actually, let me remember. I mowed it once, Then we broadcast seed with like just the push behind grass seeder, because that's what we had. And then I mowed it again to help, because it kind of mulches and tosses everything to try to get the soil, the seed actually, and soil contact. And it worked great. We had, you can see the Sudan grass here. This specific patch where the students are, got to be a little over 6 feet tall before it wasn't even going to go to seed or anything. It wasn't even starting to, but it crowded out a majority of the Canadian thistle. I was so happy. But a few of the straggling Canadian thistle in sort of the middle of the patch were starting to get flower heads, and so I mowed the whole plot. So I mowed it once, sort of late summer, once it was sort of at its peak, and then we actually mowed it again right in the fall. Actually, I believe it was after that frost. I mowed it again because we decided to plant garlic into this plot, and we're using the other plot for something. So I mostly mowed it just to turn all of that into mulch. But we were very happy with how it outcompeted the Canadian thistle, and that was the big goal. In the fall, we did a couple of different cover crops. So this was like the win. I was able to have facilities bring a big tractor down and do a little bit of tilling. It was very hard because the soil was hard as a rock and it hadn't rained in ages. And then it rained just a tiny bit and they came down like a quarter of an inch. And they were actually able to sort of like scuff up the ground a little bit in some places that basically had weeds all summer. And I just mowed them down because that's all we had time for. And then we were able to, I was able to, just with that like scuffing of the tiller, and like I said, they kind of tilled the top to sort of scuff it up, but they couldn't even get the plow. Like they have sort of like a rototiller on a big tractor. They couldn't even really get it down. They scuffed up maybe the top inch of soil. I broadcast seeded this pea oat cover crop in several large locations on camp or on several large plots, and it rained perfectly, and we got incredible growth. It outcompeted the huge pigweed problem or amaranth. I had to look up what the actual name was. It's an amaranth. It's like a red amaranth. I think everyone in Indiana calls it pigweed. It really outcompeted that, which was fantastic. But in some sections where we did this cover crop, we have a bindweed problem, and that still grew just fine along with our peas and oats. But we were really happy about this, and that was our growth October. It was beautiful before it got frost killed. Go ahead. Um, in our giving garden, we had a beautiful squash patch that had landscape fabric. When we pulled the landscape fabric up, this is what the soil looked like. I don't know how many of you, I've never used landscape fabric to this degree. There was drip irrigation under it, so I think this is probably just salt buildup from that like evaporation of water. But if anyone has any thoughts on this, uh, I would love to hear it. Um, the landscape fabric did keep the weeds down though, so that was great. If you want to skip to the next slide, to help with this, after we pulled up the squash and everything, our Putnam County Soil and Water Conservation District for the last couple of years has given sort of the extra cover crops, donated those to the Giving Garden. So once we pulled up that landscape fabric, I tilled lightly, just maybe like an inch. We have what they call a power harrow, I think is the attachment for our BCS. And so it doesn't go super deep, maybe an inch deep. And I just scuffed up that surface where all that soil crust and salt crust was. Planted that late, but we actually got great germination right there in the first week in October. And we covered the soil pretty well before the frost really took it. So that was, I think, a real win for the Giving Garden. The picture, I didn't take pictures, so I missed this cover crop. We cleared out the space to the left. You see the area where there's like a little bit of green. This was a large section that was mostly tarped. It was an experiment with squash from earlier in the year that did not pan out. And this area, I planted a different cover crop. It was super late. We happened to be close to Byron Seeds, so I just went and talked to them and said, I bought it on October 8th. I was like, the weather looks good. What can I try to grow? I have this area that has basically been tarped all summer and kind of scorched, and it was very dry. And I can scuff up the soil and I can try to plant something. What do you think that I could get to grow? So they gave me sort of a diverse cover crop. I think there are about 9 things in it. They call it soil builder. It has a radish. There are some annual ryegrass and I think hairy vetch and a couple of other things. So we just tried it. It did germinate. I have the soil covered for the winter. And so that worked considering it was October 9th when I planted it. So that was I think it was a little bit of a win. Okay, you can move forward. Here are a few of the crops that we did have. These are all of the questionable pictures. We did, as you saw pictures, we grew a lot of tomatoes, both in the Giving Garden and for Bon Appetit to sell to main campus. We grew a variety of different kinds. We tried our best, but we did have issues with water consistency. So we had a lot of cracking, which you can see in the top picture, which I'm sure other people have as well. But this is a common problem that we have, especially with those cherry tomatoes. We were having a lot of issues. In the bottom right, you can see either tomato or tobacco hornworm. We were seeing the parasitic wasp, which was exciting, but we had a lot of problems. Um, with that, with specifically worms in our tomatoes this year. In the center picture, we think, if you all know, I think that that was probably a raccoon, but I could be wrong. Um, Little bites in there. They ate a lot of our tomatoes. Um, and that's an ongoing problem. When I say a lot, there were times where I think like we lost like half of the ripe tomatoes were eaten, or had a bite in them, like this one right here, which is quite frustrating. And then on the left, you can see that's actually a Giving Garden post. We ended up picking a lot of our aromas a little bit early because we were having so many issues with the critters eating them before. So that's why we have a lot with green shoulders and things. But they were still well received. So that's how we sort of got around that problem. Okay, go ahead next. Um, we tried to grow a lot of squash. We did not eat them. The groundhog that lives in our farm and nearby is the one that ate all of our squash. This is a zucchini picture that we saw, and we did also try to grow many, many other kinds of pumpkins and things, and we're unsuccessful at deterring this guy from eating them. So that is a major thing that we're going to focus on next year is trying to deal with this guy. We do have some ideas and being on a campus and different things, we have some different things to think about with that. But no, not too many squash from our garden this year. Okay, go ahead next. The big one of the big wins was the sunflowers. We had our little sunflower field here. We grew 2 different kinds of sunflowers. If you look at the bottom left picture, we had 2 separate plantings of a hybrid pollenless that we did direct seed. And we used the earthway seeder for that, and I didn't have the right plate. So next year, I've been doing some reading, and the popcorn plate, if you have the earthway seeder, is supposed to be better for sunflowers, and so I'm going to try that next year. We had them a little bit too close together, but we did 2 waves, hoping to get the big gold bloom for our alumni weekend, which actually panned out. This picture is from our alumni weekend, and we have a lot of the gold sunflowers, which is DePauw color. So that was fun. And then we have a bigger section with the branching sunflowers, which we transplanted. So we did start those in little, actually, sort of like the compostable pots. And then we got them going and then we transplanted them in larger spacing, and we spaced them so that we could mow with our BCS between the rows. So then people could walk among the flowers, which was the goal, that people could get in there and walk around. And that worked out really well for these fall sunflowers. If you turn to the next page, I have this is just some of the fun branching sunflowers that we had in that patch, and there were quite a diversity. We bought like a mix from this was like the Johnny's Summer Breeze mix, but there were a lot of autumn colors in that mix, and it turned out to be pretty fun and was really popular on our social media. And people came down, and we opened the farm for it, so that was fun. Okay, you can go ahead and um, I'm going to end here. I took put a couple of other pictures at the bottom, but the real highlight, I think, of our farm in 2025, besides trying to sort of plan for the future with the cover crops, which was a big part for me, was engaging students and community members and continuing and ex really expanding production in the Giving Garden. So the Giving Garden was started in 2024 by Susan Hickman, who is here at DePauw, a staff member who runs the greenhouse on campus with all the cool plants for the biology department. And she doesn't really know much about growing vegetables. I would say she didn't, but she definitely does now. She wanted to start an opportunity out here for community and student engagement, and it really has become that. And so this year, we changed the way we sort of I helped to move it more into sort of a market garden setup to with the irrigation and streamlining things. And with that, we increased production quite a bit, although she says we increased production, but they didn't weigh everything last year, so we don't know. We donated about 2,400 pounds of produce to the Food Pantry Coalition here in Putnam County. That's a 14-member group, and so they're these various food pantries that work together through that coalition, and we donated to different members of that group. We had over 140 volunteer hours, most of which were by master gardeners, and then also DePauw staff and some students. If you turn the page, there's one more picture on the next one. These were not of their faces, but these are two of my now dear friends, Master Gardener volunteers who came out every week for 2 to 3 hours. And Howard here just showed everyone, shows the students, shows me just the determination and consistency of hard work. And so he was such a shining light to have on at the farm and on campus, especially when the students came out and other community members came out, just to show us how to get the job done. He's such a wonderful vegetable farmer and such a wonderful person. So these volunteers really made our summer. So with that, I will take any questions that you have, but thank you so much for having me and letting me talk a little bit about the farm. Yeah, lots more pretty pictures, but
Yeah, I didn't know if you want to talk specifically about any of these other goals for
oh yeah.
2026.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, so for 2026, I want to continue with the weed suppression. We're going to try some earlier spring cover crops with different options. We're going to do some season extension with you guys. Indiana Small Farms is going to come out and do a workshop with us. And we're going to keep working on mulching. We want to increase diversity of our cover crops, especially for floral resources. Yeah, just expand our ability to provide for the food pantries as well.
Yay! Thank you so much, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we'd love to turn it over to anybody's questions or anybody's comments. I know Ruth Mishler, if you want to introduce yourself, great connection with somebody from Goshen College.
Yeah, there are a lot of comments over here. I'll sort of look through and see.
Yeah, Lindsay Johnston has also had great success with sorghum Sudan grass and, repeated plantings for Canadian thistle management. I wouldn't say elimination, but
Man, right.
management.
Yeah. Um,
I just popped a few thoughts on salts in the chat as well, if anybody else has any recommendations on that, but just keep doing what you're doing is the thought with continuing to add organic matter
Mhm.
and crop rotation, cover cropping as much as you can in those areas, and in those drought conditions, if you can have times where you heavily flush those soils to get, those salts flushed further down in the soil profile.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit about the power harrow. Ellie, you also made a comment about that. Yeah, that has been really interesting for me. I've never sort of utilized that implement before. But it's for those of you who don't have access to that or don't know what it is, it's really interesting because it allows um, you to go just super shallow, but then there's this roller on the back end of it that helps you from going too deep and then also helps smooth out the bed. Moving into this year, I'm going to try to put a few areas more in sort of permanent raised bed style with some of the BCS attachments that we have, and it'll allow us to really kind of level everything out and get it flat for the beginning. Eventually, I would like to move away from all of that tillage when possible, but that'll be great for those areas.
Yeah, I think I just want all of our ag professionals, right, to keep that in mind that on these really small scales, there are a lot of options for different kinds of tillage, right? And that, things from a 6-inch deep tiller attachment to a power harrow looks very different, or broad forking, that kind of soil disturbance is different. And it's good for us to all, be hearing for those context, goal clues, and, what is the purpose? You use that soil disturbance very purposefully to be able, in a very high weed pressure environment with limited labor, to establish a cover crop successfully, and that's fantastic.
And Jackie, Kevin asked, what was the transition from sorghum Sudan grass to garlic like? Was it hard to plant in? Did you till it?
Yeah, so did not till it. So I mowed it down. Oh yeah, this page I
Okay.
have a picture. This was I mowed I mowed it a second time in this location because we have this sort of like a bush hog attachment for the BCS. And so I can kind of tilt it to mow tall things, and then I dropped it down to like mow it a little bit closer. And you can see here we had the first frost, but then there was like an early October frost here. I don't know if anybody else had that. I think it was in the second week of October. And so it mostly got the Sudan grass. The green that you see here is sort of the areas where it was protected a little bit, which is why I went back and mowed it. And then it's all dead. Of course, it all died within like 2 weeks after that second frost that we got. So all I did was just mow it down. And then we just used a full size shovel, and that this is how I personally have grown garlic on a large scale is I just use a full-size shovel and don't dig, but just like tilt it to create a gap and then wedge the garlic down in there and then just kick it back with your foot. It's like limited soil disturbance that way. This is pretty heavy clay soil everywhere in our garden. So tilling, yes, would be difficult, especially with the Sudan grass roots and stuff. But no, that's all we did. But we had a nice mulch layer on top, and then we actually put a little bit of compost, and then we went back over it. Actually, finals week, which was in December, with a shredded leaf mulch, because again, that's what we had available.
Awesome. Good on you.
That's all the questions.
Okay.
Just give it any more time for anybody else to pop in. I guess we'll go ahead and move on. And if you do have other questions, and if Jackie, if you're available for the next, 10 minutes or so to just stay on and answer
Yeah.
anything in the chat, we will get these slides and the recording up on YouTube as well. And just, I'm just so excited to continue to work with you and learn from you and, think about this environment that you have and all the wonderful things that you're doing to, build in conservation and production on your farm. So
Yeah,
thank you
and
so
we
much.
look forward to seeing anyone at the March what do you call them, learning events or whatever as well. So yeah, thank you.
Just gonna pull up my other slides here. We don't have too much more to share. I took this from your farm again, just being out there earlier this week and all the excitement yet to come for the spring. So I'll just kick it over to you, TNB, to share a little bit about the North.
Yeah, I've been kind of out for vacation, so working remotely a little bit more this past month. But um, so um, it was really cool. I got to do my first site visit at Fields Market Garden in Hamilton County with Kate Sexton here in this picture. We went out to their farm, and it's a entrusted, and so they also have a really nice greenhouse, a little bit of a community space to be able for the community members to come and learn how to grow. She works with disabled youth and has had really good success with trying to use cover crops, crop rotation, and she's been dealing with some weed pressure too, but we were kind of suggesting getting some goats from a local partner to come out and graze on some of those weeds and help out with that pressure too. So that might be an interesting take. And we went out and did soil testing and just saw what she has going on in her greenhouse too. So the Fields Market Garden has a cut flower farm and veggies, and they do education. So she's doing a lot, as you guys can imagine. And that was my first site visit. I've been starting to get some people interested in coming out and doing soil tests and technical assistance. So keep them coming. And yeah, just fill out the questionnaire that's about to come up ahead and reach out anytime. Love to talk with you guys.
Awesome, thank you. And Megan is out sick, unfortunately, but she and Tanvi and others from the Living Farm series hosted one at Let Us Learn in New Albany, Indiana, and just a great educational organization that works with youth and grows food for community. And I don't know if there's anything else that you want to say about that, Tanvi.
No, I wasn't able to attend, but they had a great time looking at how they're growing in this greenhouse in containers. And so nothing is in ground. And they've had a lot of success in growing in containers. So a lot of master gardeners were out there, and any community members that came out found it really useful to know how to do it on this type of scale, and grow different types of plants that you normally wouldn't see. Like in that picture on the right, you can see a banana tree in a large pot, which is really cool.
That's great exposure for folks to see.
Hmm.
And there's been a lot more admin these last couple months too. Just, with transitioning to our new agreement, just really thankful to all our NRCS partners for engaging with us and, helping us get up to speed. There'll be more in February and March as well, just on equip, NRCS programs, CART and CD training we'll have coming up next week, as well as all the programs rollouts and just thinking through more of those small farm scenarios, fiscal year 26, how to really support our field staff within our CS with any applications that have come in January from small farm customers. So stay tuned for more on that. But if you're on this call, feel free to just reach out to us directly and get us, on farm with those site visits for anybody who has applied and start thinking about the tools, mulching, cover crop, high tunnels, low tunnels, the whole suite of practices and how we can do more of that holistic planning and get folks conservation plans, program assistance, etc. So a few site visits, more coming up, and just encourage you all to continue to reach out to all of us. And then I popped this slide on here too as a reminder if you weren't able to join, Kevin Allison with Marion County Soil and Water hosted a cover crop as well as a mulching tool webinars. Those are both up on YouTube with accompanying slide decks. So take a look at those. Those are both for field staff on here. Those are both the implementation serve as the implementation requirements for both cover crop and mulching practices. And that's something that we can help support with in creating those specified plans for customers. And, if you're with SWCDs too, I think this is a great way to plug in and get familiar with these tools as well as a way to take that technical assistance with even really small scale gardeners to the next level and get comfortable with these tools. There's also, of course, the educational materials that accompany. And then here is that small farms questionnaire. So this is the first step to get us out on farm and have growers request us for soil testing and TA. And there is going to be a similar questionnaire for DCs who directly want to request assistance too. This mirrors the same questionnaire. Um, just please go ahead and we want to come out and see you. This is a reminder of our coverage for all of our staff. Far Northeast, Mike Ryan is through Allen County and covers those 7 counties in the far Northeast. Tanvi in the north, Megan in the south, me here in the Southwest Central. And then it's definitely conference season. There is more Living Farm series coming up with us. Seton Harvest here on the 15th. And then in March, we'll be in Indianapolis with Soul Food Project. Then we have some virtual learning opportunities with CCSI's Intro to Soil Health. I still have this Small Farm Soil Health 101. That will most likely be pushed to March as February is very full with programs learning with NRCS. Megan will be headed up to Marbleseed. Thank you to Sayre for their support on that. And then there's the Oaks Conference. Um, let's see. And then also the Purdue, what used to be just the Small Farms Conference is now Hort and Small Farms combined. So a lot of learning opportunities from research projects from Purdue staff, as well as those small scale farmer presentations too. And then go ahead and join us on Monday next month. Due to Small Farms Conference, we'll be hosting that early on Monday, 9 to 10, and most likely have Matt DeJong from DeJong Farm, who Tanvi is in connection with is it Lake County? Yeah, Lake County, Indiana, a little bit larger of a farm, integrating soil health and conservation practices. And then all of the YouTube recordings from past Small Farms updates are on our website as well as those presentation slides. So we'll get those up and out promptly from Jackie's presentation. And just so much love in the chat for you, Jackie, and everything that you're doing. It just touches on so much of what we're here to support. And excited to just continue to connect, hear from you. We'll connect you with Ruth from Goshen. And anything else that I'm
Yes, thank
missing?
you so much for having me.
Anything else from folks who showed up today that you didn't get answered? Oh, Andrew says, when is the Ullem farm workshop in March that you mentioned?
Let me look at my calendar. Apologize. Uh, um, okay, I think we have it. We'll have to check with Megan. I'm assuming it's going to be up soon. We have tentatively scheduled March 15th at 2 p.m. And we will be
Awesome.
putting low tunnels in the Giving Garden area and experimenting with a few different things to try to get some earlier season. Um, I actually have the seed sitting right here. We're going to be starting a few waves of kale and a couple of other greens. We're going to try to start them in the greenhouse and then see how early we can get them out. We'll also do some direct seeding into a low tunnel and do some experiments.
Awesome. That's great. So yeah, March 15th, and I'm just gonna pop our link to our newsletter and then of course Facebook and then our website events. We'll get that up as soon as we can.
And as you guys know, or maybe just a little reminder, if you know of anyone else who is interested in speaking and being a guest speaker for and a future small farms updates, um, they're more than welcome to contact and reach out to us. And um, we do a lot of reaching out, but people are also welcome to, uh, yeah, suggest that they would want to speak. And share what they've got going on their small farms or research too. We've gotten a lot, anything small farms related.
Thanks for that plug. Yeah, I think it's on me to find somebody for April, and I don't have anybody yet, so let me know. All right. Well, with that, we're going to close out here a little bit past the hour and look forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.